I look like Yahoo Serious fucked a Muppet, and then that Muppet had like a palette swapped version in Mortal Kombat. Last week was barely on the rails, but I feel like this week is like the dumb broad in front of the camera is trying to pilot the ship, and the production half of me is trying to keep the slattern in line, and it's... Whew, here we go. This week I tackle the Game Gear. Or not really, because I don't own one, and everything in this episode is run through HDMI and a TV. My life is a lie. Fantasy Zone Gear. Oppa Oppa Junior no Boken was released in 1991 in Japan and 1992 in the Americas. Well, maybe not Canada, but at least here. Developed by Sanritsu. For whatever reason other than gussying up the occasional modern port, Fantasy Zone has been largely neglected by Sega, which is odd considering its main character Oppa Oppa functioned as their de facto mascot for a hot minute. Fantasy Zone Gear feels disorienting at first because from the start you realize not only is the UI missing, but it occurs to you that the UI is part of what makes Fantasy Zone Fantasy Zone. And usually people get hung up on the radar and shit, like people get hung up on whether or not the Outrun car is a Ferrari. I'm not really complaining though, because having played a lot of various Fantasy Zones, I can say this one does what it does wonderfully. I should point out once again that everything in this episode is played through a Mega SG, so your mileage may vary on a Game Gear proper. Gameplay is the same as usual. There are several enemy bases within your level, which loops horizontally. Destroy all of the bases and fight a boss. It's pretty simple, which leaves the bulk of the challenge up to pure shooter mania. As with other games in the series, floating shot bubbles appear and you can use the gold that enemies drop to purchase a decent selection of guns, bombs, power-ups, and extra lives, with a few of these choices being new and exclusive to the Game Gear. There's a shield which absorbs up to 20 shots and a screen-clearing flash attack. A nice change in this version is you can pause and switch weapons at any time. That's how the flash attack is deployed. Bosses are fairly unique, but some have the same DNA and similar attack patterns to most of the bosses from before. Fantasy Zone Gear is a fantastic required piece of Game Gear software. There are enough changes and quirks to justify playing it, but of course it's not going to reach the heights of Fantasy Zone 2W or whatever. Beware though, prices on eBay in particular tend to be erratic, and I wound up paying much more for the manual than the game itself. Moving on from one Sega game with an arcade pedigree, ported to Game Gear, to another Sega game with an arcade pedigree, ported to Game Gear. It's Pengo's time to shine. Look at the little Pengo doing the thing. Pengo was originally released in the arcades in 1982, and this version, as I gesticulate to it on the couch, came 8 years later. The original game was developed by Sega and Banpresto back when they were still called Coreland. Banpresto was Coreland, I mean. They went on to do some oddball shit in the arcade in the mid-80s. Like, I think they did I'm Sorry, which... Never mind. Pengo feels good and hectic considering how old it is, and there are just enough play dynamics to keep things dynamic, whatever. Mechanics are a common concept. Shove large objects around the room and crush whoever. To keep visibility up on the Game Gear versus the original arcade version, character sprites are disproportionately large compared to the grid of floor tiles and objects that make up the playfield. It still works, however, kind of a clever workaround if you ask me. So yeah, smash people. One of the cooler moves at your disposal is sending an electric shot along the perimeter of the stage if an enemy is also touching the edges. It runs the risk of making things a little uneven, but the end result is a good combination of hectic and fun. I think that's the second time I said hectic. You wind up feeling like you're doing better than you expect while things around you are a total freak out and who hasn't been there, haha. The original version of the game used the song Popcorn by Hot Butter, released in 1972. The majority of home versions don't have this, but the Japanese Game Gear version actually does. Most others will have a fairly inoffensive, hummable tune replacing it instead. and you see those little special blocks, you can actually mush 4 of those together and you get a massive score bonus. For a while there I was obsessed with doing that, but then I sort of just got whatever about it. You'll notice at the beginning that some of the blocks have this sort of green flash about them. That means later on in the stage they'll turn into eggs and release more enemies, but you can crush these blocks ahead of time if you memorize where they are. That's kinda clever. Comfortable is a pretty good way to describe Pango. Simple and solid, like early 80s Sega arcade stuff. Sega borrowed a few more pop songs in the 80s. Super Locomotive comes to mind, because they shamelessly used Riding by Yellow Magic Orchestra. And honestly, more games should probably illegally use YMO songs, to be honest. Anyway, the first Sonic the Hedgehog game was released in 1991. Sonic Chaos reached the Master System in 1993, and a port for the Game Gear, which runs reasonably cheaper nowadays, was released the same month, give or take. You see, I'm getting used to the thing where the light washes out the case. This is the year 2021. If you need me to explain Sonic the Hedgehog to you, you shouldn't be here right now. I really wanted to be snarky and brash and be like, you know who Sonic is, and pull a great ice hockey on this one, but relented on this like I relented on that. This was developed by Aspect and released in 1993. In Japan it was called Sonic and Tails, and sure as shit you can play as either. Aspect were primarily in charge of 8-bit Sonic titles starting with Sonic 2. New features this time around are Sonic's rocket shoes, a pogo spring, and the strike dash, deployed by holding up and charging with your buttons, the opposite of the spin dash. Playing as Tails gives you a slight advantage, 5 lives instead of 3 for example. To even things out though, Tails can't get emeralds or pick up rocket shoes. Win-lose. Some of the knocks this has against it are the cramped screen, and the levels seem really super short, like something's wrong. The overall sensation is a bit off, like you're playing a bootleg. As long as you can put the feel of a typical Sonic game to the side, you shouldn't hate this a bunch. Ideally, you'll wind up with an analog pocket, and you could play this in the back of a van on the road or whatever. That'd be cool. Just like Jurassic Park, you'd be foolish to seek out the Master System version unless you're rich, so just settle on this one instead. A lot of 8-bit Sonic games wound up on the Sonic Gems collection for Game Gear, or GameCube, the Sonic Gems collection for GameCube, except for Sonic Chaos, so you can justify buying that and not have any overlap there. Also, it's like $2. Not Sonic Gems. Last I saw that was like fucking $35 at the exchange. Alien Syndrome for the Game Gear. Alien Syndrome, right? I think I've been hyping this for a couple episodes. Anyway, it's yet another port I'm discussing today, and I probably love this version more than any other, although I wrote this script before I considered that, and then I did the capture. Maybe it's got its flaws. It was not developed by Sanritsu this time, but by Sims of Outrun 2019 fame, which is funny, because we heard from Sanritsu earlier in the episode with Fantasy Zone. These scripts are fucking... Once again, this is the gist of Alien Syndrome. You're in a top-down space station, you gotta rescue all the humans, then you fight the boss, okay? Okay. What makes this different is, well, besides being portable, this version was developed by Sims, and according to the opening text, it happens after the events of the first game, so that's odd. This plays as well as it needs to, and the music is way, way better than it needs to be. My favorite part, however, is, on stage 4, the game finally goes all in on the Giger shit. Enough so that if this was a little more high fidelity, it'd probably be full-on gory. An interesting addition to this version is you can actually stack weapons. Now, unfortunately, you deal with a lot of slowdown here, and in some cases, like the enemies generating will actually make it so that you don't have as many shots on screen, and those weird baby things can spawn on top of you, but at this point, I'm just like, I don't know, it's a game, I'm having fun, whatever. A well-known secret about the game is tap 1212 on the title screen to access an options screen, which to be honest should have just been on the title menu. A much lesser known secret, however, is you must play the game on the hard difficulty to unlock the 5th stage and get the real ending. Everyone thinks this game is only 4 stages and they're dead wrong. Granted, this stage is just a weapon stock-up and a boss fight, but it's still pretty cool nonetheless. Not even the manual acknowledges this, and somehow the Alien Syndrome manual was even rarer than the Fantasy Zone one. Please don't ask how much I paid for it. Controls are good, sounds good, graphics are good. It's Alien Syndrome, probably in its almost best version, even though 4 stages in a boss fight doesn't necessarily count as long. Either way, I liked it a lot. That's going to wrap shit up for today. Subscribe and like and comment in that order. And I'll see you next week. Same bat day, same bat apartment. Sega borrowed a few more pop songs in the 80s. Super Mocha... Moving on from one Sega arcade game... Moving on from one Sega game with an arcade pedigree ported to Game Gear to another Sega arcade... Which is odd considering its main character, Opa Opa, once